Hello aspirants, those who appeared on 25th May in the CSAT paper 2025. Let me start this session with a brief discussion of the type of questions and the number of passages and questions. So here the first thing, number of passages was 16 this year and number of questions was 29, which means that UPSC was a bit generous this time because 13 passages, small passages were given only. They had 2 questions based on them, which saves your time. And there are just 3 passages which had 1 question based on them. So in that sense, we can say that UPSC was, generous, and paper was just like 2024 paper. It was moderate or moderate plus. Now types of questions. Main idea based questions where the crux or message was asked. That was in total 15 questions of main idea were asked. Assumption, the number was 13 questions of assumption, so very high number. And corollary, just 1 question of corollary was asked here. So this year they did not ask any question of inference as such, though corollary belongs to the family of inference only, but this was the major difference. Now coming to main idea based question, as I always tell you in the classrooms that main idea based questions are very, very important questions. And UPSC asked 15 questions, 50% of the paper was just main idea. 8 questions of messages and 6 questions were central idea or crux based, and 1 question was that find out which option contains the best possible explanation of the above statement, which was like an implied idea. So there was 1 question. So in total 8 plus 6 plus 1, 15 questions of main idea were asked this year, right? So this was paper 2025. In terms of these facts and figures, we can say that exam was good. I mean, the students who have prepared and have attended the classes and followed the practice regime would not have faced much problems here. Now if I go for 29 into 2.5, then 72.5 marks was allotted to RC only. Let's now discuss the passages. So passage number 1 on your screen, and this is A series. Passage number 1, the good thing was that, another element, that passages were quite comprehensible. I mean, they were very common topic and small in length. So the first passage talks about maintaining an ecosystem just to conserve biodiversity will affect its commercial potential as well as the livelihoods dependent on the ecosystem. So this is the passage. There are 2 questions based on this. The first question asks about the critical message of the passage. We have discussed in the class that when message is asked, it means the message must contain the main point of the passage. And so remember the orange and juice analogy I told you, that the correct option must represent the main point of the author that he wants to convey through the passage, and it should reflect that point in the same esteem as the author has projected in the passage. So coming to option A, conservation of biodiversity is not an issue to be worried about when some people depend on ecosystem for their livelihoods. The author has said if we just focus on conservation of biodiversity only on this aspect of maintaining ecosystem, then there would be a problem. But it does not mean that it is not an issue to be worried when some people depend on ecosystem for their livelihoods, because this option does not represent the main point of the passage, and the main point is that there should be a balance. And the author says that the balance is, look at the language here, maintaining an ecosystem just to conserve biodiversity will affect its commercial potential, right? So it will be just to conserve the biodiversity will not be good. Similarly, he says there is also a conflict between using an ecosystem only for livelihoods, that will again create problem. For commercial exploitation, only for commercial exploitation, again a problem, or strictly for conservation. So it means he is taking a middle of the approach, middle of the road approach, and he wants to talk about the balance there. And at the end, he says these conflicts are particularly acute in developing countries where the dependence of people on the ecosystem is significant and commercial exploitation has the potential to boost national income. Right. Special problem, acute problem is there in the developing countries where the dependence of people on ecosystem is significant. So this delicate balance is hampered there. So coming to option message, first option A is wrong because it does not represent the main point of the passage. B says commercial exploitation of forest goes against the fundamental rights. The moment you find any new element present in the option, must cross check for the data. So there is no discussion on fundamental rights here. It has been projected that way, but not in the context of fundamental rights. Second, C, sustenance of livelihood and degradation of ecosystem while being together exacerbate one another. Exacerbate means to worsen, to make something bad or worse, leading to conflicts and imbalance. We have just read the case in the developing countries. The author says the problem is more acute. Why? Because that balance is disturbed. So, which leads to conflicts. So, C is the best option. And the D option says commercial exploitation of ecosystem should be completely stopped. Now, the word is completely. Author has, this is a violation of the degree. Author has said only for commercial exploitation will not be good, which does not mean that commercial exploitation should be completely stopped. So, D does not represent the main point. It is the C option. And this was a question that each of you must have got correct because of the errors in other options. The second question based on the passage is assumption. And as you know, this combination has been followed in 50% of the paper. One question asking main idea, the second question is assumption. So, which is very helpful because the assumption will always be in support of the author's argument. So, in a way, while doing the main idea, you get the idea for the assumption as well. Look at option 1. Statement 1, no country needs to depend on ecosystem to boost national income. Now, this is a very extreme notion. No country needs to depend on ecosystem to boost. Author has not eliminated this possibility. He says maintaining an ecosystem just to conserve biodiversity will affect its commercial. Just to conserve biodiversity will affect its commercial potential as well as the livelihoods dependent on the ecosystem. So, no country needs to depend on ecosystem to boost national income is not what the author has suggested. So this option is out, statement is out. Second, resource-rich countries need to share their resources with those of scant resources so as to prevent the degradation of ecosystem. Right. So the resource-rich countries need to share their resources with those of scant resources. Even those countries which have scant resources or shortage of resources so as to prevent the degradation of ecosystem. You see, for an assumption to be true, you need to have the data sufficiently present in the passage, but there is no data in support of this. Author has not suggested that what the resource rich countries, how they can help. So this goes beyond the passage, right? And the answer should be D. For any statement of an assumption to be true, there should be some backing in the passage present. Author has only discussed about the problem in the developing countries where they, without making any claim about the resource rich countries need to share. So second question, it should be D option. Passage number 2, history of renewable energy suggests there is a steep learning curve, meaning that as more is produced, cost will fall rapidly because of economies of scale and learning by doing. Okay. So again, an easy passage, and the first question is main idea, central idea of the passage. Question number 3. Central idea, it must contain the main point. If the passage is orange, option must contain the juice, the main component of the passage as a central idea. So first option, option A, economies of scale is essential for transition to green growth. You know, economies of scale is no doubt suggested in the passage in the beginning part, but you have to cross check whether the sufficient data is given to accept essential, because essential means mandatory. Without it, it is not possible. So here the option has, author has said, history of renewable energy suggests there is a steep learning curve, meaning that as more is produced, costs fall rapidly because of economies of scale. As economies of scale, as you know, that more production means that the cost will go down. So economies of scale and learning by doing, they are helpful in terms of then, you know, as more is produced. So economies of scale as larger scale, but it's not saying that it is the essential aspect. Economies of scale is essential for transition to green growth. That is point number 1 because of this. Second point is that has the author discussed only about the economies of scale, to qualify this option as the correct answer, it should encompass the entire passage. But you find that there are other points given as well which are left out, and they are more significant point. B option says modern technological progress is intensely linked to path-dependent innovations. Now, path-dependent innovations come from the passage. Author says that the forms which are path-dependent. And path-dependent means that they have done something in past, and on the basis of that, they reap the benefit in present and future. So, this expression, modern technological progress, it is a very generalized expression because the passage only talks about the green technology, renewable energy. So it talks about the renewable sector, renewable energy sector. But modern technological progress could be related to any other field also. So that's why B is too generalized, hence is not the best option. C says countries with large economies are in a better position to adopt green technologies. Maybe, but it does not represent the passage, right? So as a central idea, it should be the point of the passage. D is the best option. Timing plays a crucial role in the case of green technology development. Timing plays a crucial role. Where is the data support for this? Let me show you about the timing. You see, the first he talks about that the history of renewable energy suggests there is a steep learning curve, right? It means it starts from the past, and then it talks about economies of scale, how it is helpful. The firm's green innovation is path dependent, right? Something has been that in the past, something has been done. On the basis of that, they proceed, and so they get benefit. The more a firm does, the more it is likely to do in the future, right? So related to time, now the author says the strong evidence for this is the collapse in the price of solar energy, which becomes 90% cheaper during 2000. Moving early, now for the timing part, you see he says moving early and gradually gives economies more time to adjust, allowing them to reap the benefits of path independent green investment without much disruption, right? So starting early and gradually gives them benefit, whereas a late, more chaotic transition is costlier. Late, so related to time, so you have more support for the time part, and that's the reason D is a better option. Option B was very good, but modern technological progress is, not just confined to green revolution or renewable energy sector. That's the point. So that was your D. Question number 4, assumption question. The first statement, path dependent green investments will eventually most likely benefit, there is a strong probability, most likely benefit growth as well as public finances in a country like India, right? Path dependent green investment will eventually most likely benefit growth as well as public finances. Now you see, this statement is a valid assumption because author has said that such firms which are path dependent, they get the benefit. So let me show you the relevant part. Now students appearing 26 must learn this part, that for the different statement you must go to the relevant part of the passage. Now here, this option, the statement here, the firm's green innovation is path dependent, right? The more a firm does, the more it is likely to do in the future. So it is path dependent. The strongest evidence for this is the collapse in the price of solar energy, which became about 90% cheaper. And moving early and gives economies more time to adjust. So it talks about the country, economy. So for first one, path dependent green investments will eventually most likely benefit growth as well as public finances in a country like India. Yes, and this is the correct assumption. Path dependent has been projected in a positive way, and then for green, most likely benefit growth as well as public finances in a country like India, like the solar energy has been given as put forth as an example. Second statement, if other green technologies follow the same pattern as that of solar energy, there will most likely, again the word is most likely, be an easy green transition. Now, the transition will be easy or difficult. Let's find out the data in support for this. If other green technologies follow the same patterns that of solar energy, there will be most likely be an easy green transition. Now, this assumption should also be valid because the author has said, when he talks about this green innovation, he says the firm's green innovation is path dependent. The more a firm does, the more it is likely to do in the future, as I have already discussed the path dependent. And the strongest evidence, now for this point, for this assertion, he gives you an example. The strongest evidence for this is the collapse in the price of solar energy. So it became cheaper, which became about 90% cheaper, very big number during the 2010s, repeatedly beating forecast. It means it was much cheaper than the forecast itself. Moving early and gradually gives economies more time to adjust, allowing them to reap the benefits of path dependent green investment without much disruption. Without much disruption. It means it's not going to be difficult. So while talking about the solar energy in a positive way, author says that it became cheaper by 90%, right? Why it became cheaper by 90%? Because it means it was path dependent, and more a firm does, that is explanation of the path dependent, the more it is likely to do in the future. The strongest evidence is solar energy. And then he explains that moving early and gradually gives economies more time to adjust, allowing them to reap the benefits of path dependent green investment without much disruption. As it happened in the solar energy, the same is possible in other green energy as well. So if other green technologies follow the same pattern as that of solar energy mentioned in a positive way here, they will most likely is the word, be an easy green transition without much disruption. So the answer should be both 1 and 2. We have the data support for both assumptions here. Next passage. Again, a very small passage, 2 questions based on it. Each state in India faces a distinctive set of challenges. Distinctive set of challenges. The keyword must always be noticed, but also offers its own set of opportunities for reducing emissions depending on its natural resources. Right? So this is, and then author gives an example. Now, let me take you to the question number 11. Question 11 asks about the message, the most logical, rational and pragmatic message conveyed by the author. Option A, the mitigation and adaptation strategies to address or tackle the climate change is essentially the responsibility of each state. Now the question is that we don't have the data for this, let alone it being the key message. Even it does not have any data in support, essentially it is the responsibility of the each state. So A is out. B, India is too diverse to implement any effective strategy or program to address or tackle the climate change, but the author is suggesting otherwise. You will find that B option is in fact contradicting the passage itself. Author says that each state can tackle it, each state has distinctive problems, and at the same time it has the opportunities. So effective strategy is not ruled out, and a main idea or message cannot be contradicting. So the correct option should always be in support or should represent the passage. C says it is basically the responsibility of the union government. Again, we don't know the responsibility of the state or union government. We are left with option D, which is India needs to formulate effective climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies at the state or region level. Yes. So here it was essentially responsibility of each state, we don't know. And similarly responsibility of basically the responsibility of the union government, we don't know. But this statement, the way it is written is, India needs to formulate effective climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies at the, as the bureaucracy demands that the choice of words and the language should represent the passage correctly. So D is the best option. And second question of assumption. Question number 12. Again, two statements. So UPSC gave just two statements for assumptions here. They did not give multiple statements, which was the trend in the year of 2019, 2021. So that was another benefit this year. So statement 1, green energy production can be linked to or integrated with the climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies. Absolutely correct. Green energy production can be linked to, integrated with the climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies. Let me show you the data support for the first assumption. So they have their own set of opportunities for reducing emissions. They are facing the challenges regarding the impact of warming, but also offers its own set of opportunities for reducing emissions, right? Depending on its natural resources. This is the first line statement in support of the assumption number 1. And second, he talks about, he says, Himalayan regions have their own unique challenge, and selected parts of peninsular India and offshore areas offer great opportunities for harnessing wind power. So whatever has been said, it's backed by the example. So question number 12, and the first statement, green energy production can be linked to, integrated with the climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies, right? They can cut down the emissions and by using their own resources. Second statement is, effects of climate change are much more severe in coastal and mountainous regions. Now, be careful of this kind of statement. At the first glance, it makes sense. Why? Because author has mentioned here Himalayas, author has mentioned the coastal areas. So effects of climate change are much, here the expression much more severe in coastal and mountainous regions. And you are not supposed to apply your own knowledge. You have to go by the passage only. So do we have the data support for this? I'll show you. It has mentioned Himalayan. It has mentioned the coastal areas, for example, coastal states. But the author has also mentioned here districts that are drier need to prepare for variable monsoon precipitation. Similarly, will it be more serious? The problem in mountainous region and coastal region will be much more serious than the areas of deserts or not? We don't have the data for that. So that claim is incorrect. For question number 12, statement number 2, that effects of climate change are much more severe in coastal and mountainous region. It means they are more serious than the areas of Rajasthan or Gujarat, the areas with desert. We don't have data support for this. So it's a DI case, data inadequate case, and hence your second is out. Only one is correct. Option A. Next passage. If the social inequality is the most acutely felt social problem in India, insecurity more than poverty is the most acutely felt economic problem. So insecurity is even more serious than poverty itself, and it's most acutely felt economic problem in India, right? Author is started with an example comparison here. Besides those follow below the, now he explains that how insecurity is major problem, and let me take you to the questions. So question number 13, what is the critical message? The main point, go by elimination. Very important approach is elimination, find the wrong part. Option A, India's political executive should be aware that poverty and social inequality and the consequent sense of insecurity is the main social problem, whereas the insecurity has been mentioned there as an economic problem very clearly in the beginning of the passage. And also that political executive, whether they are directly or indirectly mentioned in the passage, answer is no. So it is deviating from the path. Option A is out. It has deviated. and because of this distortion as well. B says in India, poverty is the primary reason for social inequality and insecurity. Now it has, this connection is not given in the passage and it does not represent in the insecurity is a more serious problem, more acute problem, that is given. But it is the primary reason, we can't say that. That's the reason, another point in support of why B is wrong. You see, in a statement, author has said that the people who are above the poverty line, they also have sense of insecurity. It means poverty cannot be the primary reason, right? See, poverty and social inequality are so intricately linked that they pose an unmanageable crisis for India. Now, unmanageable is coming from outside. This qualitative term is not given in the passage itself. So, you have to always be careful that the juice of the orange of the passage should be there. It should not have some foreign elements. D says insecurity more than poverty is the main economic issue that government policies must address. Insecurity more than poverty, as it is the bigger problem given in the passage. So obviously it is the main economic issue that government policies must address. So D is the best option. Now it must be addressed. Some students, if they are confused that why it must address is written in the passage, when author has said that insecurity is the most acutely economic problem, the problem must be resolved. So it has been, insecurity has been projected here as a more serious problem than poverty itself. So there is no problem with that, it must be resolved by the government. Right, so the option D is the best option for question number 13. Now question 14, second question, assumption. People above the poverty line also are prone to suffer from anxiety about economic insecurity. Very simple, directly follows the data support is given in the passage. An author has given here, besides those below the poverty official line, even those just over the poverty line are subject to multiple economic insecurities, and that is given in the first statement. So data is there, the point is valid. Second, eradication of poverty can result in peace and social equality in the country. There is always a kind of tussle because the reader has his own understanding, and then there is an understanding that needs to be developed through the passage only. So there is a dilemma that whether this statement should be chosen or not. Always follow the passage, that where is the data given in the passage. No matter how appealing the option is, how factually correct the statement is, but you have to find the base in the passage, the direct or indirect, the logical or the explicit connection must be there in the para. Eradication of poverty can result in peace and social equality in the country. Now, social equality, even the caste and religion and region based inequalities won't be there. So we cannot say that. That's why second statement is incorrect. Eradication of poverty. It's not just talking about economic equality, it is talking about social equality. So, and there is no data support, answer should be 1. So RC section, especially these logical questions such as assumptions, they give this kind of challenge, that something which is very appealing to the common sense but not coming from the passage, and you are not supposed to choose that. Let's go to the next passage. One of the dismal realities of the agricultural sector in independent India has been that it never experienced a high growth phase, unlike the non-agricultural economy. Very small passage, then author gives the data that it has been just 3.5% CAGR in 1980s, and this is in sharp contrast to non-agricultural growth. So non-agricultural economy growth has been much more and has been consistent, whereas the agricultural growth has been minimal, very dismal, as the author has said. Now coming to the first question, it asks about a corollary of the passage, and now this word you must know, corollary. As I said, this is the single question of corollary, and after 3 years UPSC has asked corollary this year. Last time they asked in 2021. A corollary is like based on the passage, what is the correct logical outcome? What is the correct logical consequence? Which should be based on the passage. So whatever the author was trying to prove or establish, just based on that, the very natural, the very obvious deduction that you can make. So based on the passage, only option A follows. The benefit of economic reforms percolates down more slowly to the agricultural sector than in other sectors of the economy. This has been mentioned throughout as per the main idea of the passage. This is the obvious choice of for corollary, because the other options are wavered. Option B देखिए, for India the green revolution was not as useful as it was expected to be. So for that matter, there is no information about the green revolution given here, right? And it is talking about for B should to be the correct corollary, the passage should have centered around green revolution and its contribution. So B is obviously wavered. See, India lagged behind other countries in adapting mechanized and modern farming, and then no such detail is given there. Rural to urban migration, nowhere it is given, resulted in the stagnant agricultural sector. Now, so there is no issue, and option A is the obvious choice based on the passage. Coming to the second question, and that is question number 22, a very interesting question, and this time UPSC give you a different type of assumption question. A different type means they first made a case and then they ask you to choose the valid assumption. Now, question 22, the growing divergence is like separation. The growing divergence between the fortunes of the agricultural and non-agricultural economy in India could have been reduced or contained by, right? So this growing difference between the fortunes of agriculture and non-agricultural economy in India could have been reduced or contained by. So that fact is given there, that there have been this difference between agricultural fortune and non-agricultural. The first statement says adapting large scale cultivation of commercial crops and viable corporate farming. You must look for the data support for the given assumptions. Up now, this adapting large scale cultivation of commercial crops. So we do not know from here that whether the traditional crops, the conventional crops, any grain producing crops, they are not as good as the commercial crops. In terms of productivity between the two, commercial crops and those conventional ones, we have no detail. So we cannot establish clearly that this adopting this large scale and similarly we know nothing about corporate farming. So from the passage we know nothing about that. The commercial crops could have done the job, would have decreased this less fortune of agricultural sector. So that's why data inadequate for first statement. So DI case clearly. Second says providing free insurance for all crops and heavily subsidizing seeds for all crops, insurance, heavily subsidizing seeds, fertilizers, electricity and farm machinery at par with developed countries. Whether these steps could have increased the agricultural fortune or not, apparently it sounds good. But all this is one-sided. To me, it is one-sided. Why? Because it is all streamlined for more production, more production of the agriculture, more agricultural produce. So these steps could have helped in that way. But we know nothing whether when it comes to MSP, when it comes to selling the produce, nothing is given on that part. So we don't have again the exact data to support that all these steps could have decreased the divergence between the two. So that's why there is a DI case for second statement as well. And to me, the answer should be D option. Neither one nor two. So For assumption, again, look for the data support in the passage itself, and there must be some connections between the para and the given statements. Now, next passage is, in our country, handlooms are equated with a culture that ensures a continuity of tradition. This idea has become part of the public policy framing and provides a legitimate basis for the state to support the sector. Legitimate basis, very positive word legitimate is. So, but the notion, and now from but author gives us another perspective, and then at the end it says, so it's not surprising that large sections of our population choose to ignore it. Against this backdrop when we promote handloom. So as a traditional industry, if it is produced, and on that basis, if the demand is to help it and to continue it, author says that to some people it won't be acceptable. Now question is the message. अब देखिए option A, we need to free the handloom industry from the limited narrative linked to preserving cultural heritage. Sounds good. B says continued state support to the handloom industry ensures the preservation of some of our glorious art forms and old traditions. You know, this underlying part, this option B does not represent the other aspect, more important aspect given in the passage. And that aspect is that why the objection is there and how the objection to the handloom industry continued as a cultural entity, an objection against that, how that is justified. So it leaves out that part and only focuses on one aspect of the passage, that it is part of our some glorious art forms and this. So B loses out. C says household units of the handloom sector should be modernized and made an economically viable organized industry. So nothing of this nature is given in the passage. C is actually going out of the passage because the passage only talks about whether the handloom as a conventional mode should continue or not. So, and it is rather going into the details of the handloom products. So C is out, and similarly D is out. Handloom products need to be converted to machine-made designer products so as to make them more popular. The products are not being discussed here. So C and D are weak option. B is the error. A is the best option. We need to free the handloom industry from the limited narrative linked to preserving cultural heritage. That's the reason many people have objection. So this narrative should be changed, right? So question number 23, answer was option A. Now second question, as per the pattern of this paper, is of assumption. There is no need for the state to be involved in any manner in the handloom sector. Sounds very flashy, very extreme notion. No need for the state to be involved in any manner in the handloom sector. You know, we cannot choose this. And author has said he is very legitimate. He has also used. So option 1 more seems to be falling out of the scope of the passage. Second, handloom products are no longer appealing and attractive. Again, the products are not being discussed and no information is about that they are not attractive or appealing. So D is the right answer. This was a comparatively easy question of assumption. Next passage. In our country, regrettably, such kind of loaded words must always be underlined while reading the passage. Loaded or keywords, regrettably. So from here you get to know the author's stand. Teaching and learning for the examination have been our forte, but the new demands of society and the future of work require critical and independent thinking. So critical and independent thinking is required. Learning through doing, asking questions from multiple disciplinary perspectives on the same issue, right? Using evidence for building arguments and reflecting in articulation. Then he talks about higher education should not either be a mere servant of the government policy or a passive respondent to public mood. Higher learning is all about how to think rather than what to think. Teaching has to be reinvented, right? So here one important point has been given. In the context of higher education, the author has discussed, and critical importance of critical thinking has been mentioned. Now, central idea must represent the main component. A says India does not have enough resources for promoting quality education in its universities. There is no discussion on resources given here. Rather, the method has been discussed. So option A is weak. B, the institution of higher learning in the country should not be under the control of the government. Should not be under the control of the government. Nothing has been mentioned about the control. C, classroom approach to higher education should be done away with. Should be done away with means to be scrapped. But author is not against the classroom approach. D is the correct answer. Classroom needs to be reimagined and teaching needs to be reinvented. So, it summarizes the passage. So, the central idea is given in D option. Classroom needs to be reimagined. It means that the passive approach, as discussed here, should not be there, but critical thinking based, independent thinking based approach should be adopted. So, D as is the correct answer for question 31. Now, as per the pattern, second question is assumption. Higher education is a constantly evolving subject that needs to align towards new developments in all spheres of society. It's an evolving subject and needs to align towards new developments in all spheres of society. Let me show you the data support for this statement. In fact, the paragraphs were so small that the student could have gone back and forth from the statements to the past options very easily. And so here, critical independent thinking, learning through doing, asking questions, all these recommendations are mentioned here, all these are X by the author. To doing, asking questions from multiple disciplinary perspectives on the same issue, from the different dimensions, from the multiple disciplinary perspectives, that is given, right? And similarly, author says, higher learning is all about how to think rather than what to think. And higher education should not either be a mere servant of the government policy or passive respondent. And it's an evolving and multidisciplinary perspectives on the same issue. It should contain asking questions from multidisciplinary perspectives. So it affirms the answer statement 1, right, as a correct assumption. The author would agree with this thought. Second, in our country, sufficient funds are not allocated. Funds are not mentioned. No data given anywhere. It's a DI case. So your answer should be option A for question 32. Next passage, if there is inequality in the pattern of population growth, there is greater inequality in food production and utilization. There is greater inequality in food production and utilization. Now, again a loaded word here. If there is inequality in the pattern of population growth, but there is greater inequality. So here the author emphasizes in food production and utilization. As societies become wealthier, their consumption of animal products increases. This means that a greater proportion of such basic foodstuffs as grains and legumes that could feed humans directly is instead being converted into feed for poultry and large farm animals. Yet this conversion of plant-based food into animal food for humans is far from efficient. It is far from efficient. Then author gives you the data in support of this, how it is far from efficient. So here one such practice which is not serving the purpose, which is flawed, is given in the passage. Question number 33, main idea, crux of the passage, crux. A, there is an urgent need for a public policy to promote the consumption of cereal-based foods in wealthier society. Now this should come from the passage, right? And it leaves out the other issues raised in the passage, important issues. So option A is incorrect. B, the correct option must always come, from the passage, within from the passage, and the point that author has emphasized on. B says animal-based food is far less efficient than plant-based food in terms of production and utilization. Yes, sounds good. You can keep it. C, plant-based protein should replace the animal-based protein. Now it has confined itself to protein only. Though no doubt protein is given in the passage, but then it has narrowed down. So C is not the best. the inequality in food production and consumption is inevitable in any fast changing. It is inevitable, something that cannot be stopped, something that will certainly happen is called inevitable. No, nothing is given of this nature. B is the best option. Animal based food is far less efficient than grain or plant based food in terms of production and utilization. Absolutely correct in terms of production and utilization, and the data support is given there that when we consume these animals, only 16% of the calories fed to chickens are received by us. This conversion rate goes down to 5 to 7% only in large animals, right? So they are being fed the plant and legumes and grains, but that is not serving the purpose because the human consumption or retention of the nutrients is far low. Next question is of assumption, question number 34. The first one, the food manufacturing and processing industry in every country should align their objectives and processes in accordance with the changing needs of the societies. And second, wealthier societies tend to incur great loss of calories of food materials due to indirect utilization of their agricultural produce. There is no doubt about the second one. It directly follows. An author has said as societies become wealthier, what they say, they go and consumption of animal products increases. And with the problem with the animal consumption is given here. I want to discuss, in fact, the challenge is there in the first statement. Second is directly following. So there is no doubt in the second one. First says the food manufacturing and processing industries in every country should align their objectives and processes in accordance with the changing needs of the society, with the changing needs of the societies. Now here it is given, there is an inequality in the pattern of population, but there is a greater inequality in food production and utilization. There is an inequality in food production, and the problem in food production and utilization is described here. That what happens, yet this conversion of plant-based food into animal food for humans is far from efficient. This means that a greater proportion of such basic, another sentence, this means that a greater proportion of such basic food stuff as grains and legumes that could feed This means that a greater proportion of such basic foodstuff as grains and legumes that could feed humans directly is instead being converted into feed for poultry and large ones. And who is converting them and feeding them? Of course, this is done by the companies. This is done by the bodies which are involved in food production and utilization. So, the food manufacturing and processing industries, manufacturing, utilization, production and utilization, and processing industry in every country should align their objectives and processes in accordance with the changing needs of the societies. Now coming with the changing needs of the societies, I find that this statement should also be correct, because as per the description here that how the food, plant and legumes are fed to the animals, and yet the retrieval from the animals in terms of nutrients is far low. So there is a fault, there is a flaw in the food production and utilization. And so as per the changing needs of the society, it's talking about the needs of the society, it is not talking about the trend of the societies. So the wealthier communities, the wealthier societies, their consumption of animal products increases, but it is not supplying the need, it is not fulfilling the need. Hence, that it should align their objectives. And there's no big problem with every country, because it is in a general way the problem is given. So as per the need, so to me the answer should be C, both 1 and 2. There's no problem with the second one, it directly follows, but the first one can be found out from this faulty system of production. So that was option C. Next question. Over the next 30 years, many countries are promising to move to net zero carbon, implying that household emissions will have to be cut to close to nothing. Close to nothing means approaching zero, coming to zero. Now, very small para, question 44, central idea. Moving to net zero carbon is possible only by the reduction in household emissions. Only by this, just the household emission is mentioned, but does not mean that only by this and no, there's no industrial emission or something. So A is out. We don't have the data support. Low carbon behavior in people can be brought about by incentivizing them. Absolutely correct. Low carbon behavior in people can be brought about by incentivizing them. And look at this support for this statement when the author discusses leading climate scientists. The author says that he reckons means means that he supports, or it also means that when somebody calculates something. So what he has calculated, leading scientists, that half the reduction might be achieved through demand side measures such as behavioral changes by individuals and households, and even that would require companies and governments to provide more incentives. It is the support for the correct answer. To change through supply side investments to make low carbon options cheaper and more widely available, so the people can adopt them or can go for them. So question number 41, there is no doubt about B option. Low carbon behavior in people can be brought about by incentivizing them. He says cheaper goods and services can be made available to people by using low carbon technologies. You have to find out the central idea of the para. So always keep that in mind, that the main point of the option must be of the passage must be there. So इसमें आपको कहता है cheaper goods and services can be made available to people by using low carbon technologies. It is not representing the main point, but rather talking about the end result. D says manufacturing industries that use low carbon technologies should be provided with subsidies. Again, it goes beyond the passage. So C and D were weak options. And next question of assumption. Question number 42. Supply side investments in companies can result in low carbon behavior in people. Supply side investments, yes. The last part of the para supports this. Second, people are not capable of adopting low carbon behavior without the involvement of government and companies. People are not capable of. People are not doing it, and people are not capable of are two different things. Not capable of, it means they don't have this capability, whereas people are not adopting, it means simply overlooking something, omitting something, however they may be capable. So that's why, because of this terminology, this second statement is incorrect. You don't have support for this. First statement, option A, should be chosen. Right, and this statement number 2 is, author has mentioned here that what leading climate scientist has calculated. He says, and even that would require companies and governments to provide more incentives to change through. But it is not showing that people are not capable of. It may be that people don't have this tendency or don't have this inclination. So 42 may it should be option A only. Next passage. In only 50 years, the world's consumption of raw materials has nearly quadrupled to more than 100 billion tons. All right. First question is, what is the key message? Most critical message. Green economy is not possible without reusing critical minerals. Not possible. It is not correct answer. Author has not said so. Though he has emphasized on reusage, recycling. Every sector of economy should adopt the reuse of material resources immediately, but it talks about every sector. Author has spoken about generally the battery and those, right? So every sector should adopt the reuse. Then in every sector, whether the reuse, the recycling has a scope or not. So B is also incorrect. Author has not included all sectors of economy. C says circular economy can be beneficial for sustainable growth. What is a circular economy? A circular economy is which is based on recycling. So certainly author has discussed about recycling, so and it can be beneficial. Directly follows, circular use of material resources is the only option for some industries for their survival. Only option author has not said, and the survival word also makes it incorrect. So correct option should only be C. Circular economy can be beneficial for sustainable growth, and it follows the passage directly. As the author has said, how these supply chains are long, and so buyers risk are batteries. Less than 9% of this is reused, यानी reuse बहुत कम है. Batteries of old vehicles contain minerals such as all these. Supply chains are, the author is building his argument. He says buyers' risk are being aggravated by their suppliers, poor environmental and labor resources. Now comes the most important. So always look for this kind of sentences. We call them topic or focus sentence. Author says reusing materials makes sense. Reusing makes sense. That is circular economy. Then he gives the example of batteries. Question number 43 is done. 44, assumption. Automobile factories are examples of the circular economy. We can't say that they are the example of circular economy because author has not mentioned automobile factories as such. Rather, he says, and I'll show you this part. He says once batteries reach the ends of their lives, they should go back to a factory where their ingredients can be recovered and put into new batteries, without saying that these factory are the automobile factory or not. So there's such a place they should go to where they can be recycled. So saying that automobile factories are example of the circular economy, we can't say, but we can only say them they are if they are going for recycling. So statement number 1 is incorrect. Second says economic growth is compatible with circular use of mineral resources. Obviously circular use we have already discussed, right? Recycling, and it is compatible. So answer should be B option. Next passage. It is hard to predict how changes in the climate and the atmosphere's chemistry will affect the prevalence and virulence of agricultural diseases. Prevalence you all know, it pervades, it spreads, and virulence is the intensity of the disease. It is very hard, but there is a risk that such changes will make some plant infectious more common in all climatic zones. Perhaps catastrophically so, at a larger magnitude will be high. Now part of the problem is that then author describes a particular problem. The problem is part of the problem is that centuries of selective breeding have refined the genomes of most high value crops. They are spectacular at growing in today's conditions, but genetic variations that are not immediately useful to them have been bred out. This is good for yields but bad for coping with changes. A minor disease or even an unknown one could suddenly rampage through a genetically honed crop. So far as the production in the present condition is given, they are doing good. But author says that they become vulnerable because of this trend, because of this breeding and selective breeding, that they won't be able to, there is a risk involved, and they may not be able to withstand the onslaught of new disease, and that may cause a risk. So central idea, global climate change adversely affects the productivity of crops. The productivity of the crops is not the main, because there is a risk factor also involved, and that risky or the vulnerable factor is missing from option A. B says our total dependence on genetically honed crops entails possible food insecurity. Sounds good. Dependence on genetically honed, yes, we have become dependent on them. Entails is something which makes or which involves necessarily something, food insecurity, yes. C, our food security should not depend on agricultural productivity alone. Also sounds good. So this C is, the examiner has written in a way that it sounds good. Our food security should not depend on agricultural productivity alone. It means that the risk factor should also be considered. D says genetically honed crops should be replaced with their wild varieties in our present cultivation. Now, maybe may be making some sense, but we have to find out the central idea, and central idea should be per se given in the passage. So D is weak option. Now B versus C, the two close option in this question, and I find that B is better because B is more specific here. Our total dependence on genetically honed crops entails possible food insecurity. And C also catches the notion, but it is a bit generalized in this sense that it does not mention the genetically honed crops as mentioned in the passage as a reason. It says our food security should not depend on agricultural productivity alone. It means the risk factor should also be considered, that the plants should be able to withstand the onslaught of diseases. So the best answer is B. C is quite close, but it was generalized. Next question is assumption based on the same passage. Global climate change can result in the migration of several plant diseases to new areas. Yes, absolutely correct. As for the data support, first statement you see here, there is a risk that such changes will make some plant infectious more common in all climatic zones, right? Perhaps catastrophically so. So there is this chance which supports this first statement, that global climate change can result in the migration of several plant diseases to new areas, because certain plants in all climatic zones will be affected. Second says scientific understanding of the wild relatives of our present crops would enable us to strengthen food security. Now it has a logical connection with the point, because the author has said that we have actually bred out the other parts that are not required. In order to increase the productivity of the plants, we have gone for a specific and breeding, and which makes it vulnerable to withstand the diseases. The scientific understanding of the wild relatives of our present crops, wild relatives where this kind of selected breeding has not been done, so would enable us to strengthen food security. This assumption should also be valid, and C should be the correct answer, right? So for question number 52 is clear. This part of the problem, centuries of selective breeding have refined the genomes of most high value crops. So these high value crops, high value, why? Because more productivity in the present scenario, but in future with the disease they might not be able to withstand. Hence their wild relatives could be helpful. So that scientific study, that's the reason I chose the second statement as a correct assumption. Next passage. A good statesman, like any other sensible human being, learns more from his opponents than from his fervent supporters. Fervent supporter is very strong and very, very charged type of supporter, बहुत जोशीला. For his supporters will push him to disaster unless his opponents show him where the danger is. Okay. So now first question is main idea, critical message. Without opposition parties, the administration in a democracy gets to become more responsible. Gets to become more responsible is actually contradicting the passage. It is in contrast with the passage, contradicting the passage. Hence, this cannot represent the message. B says democracy needs to have revolutionaries in a position to keep the government alert. Now, revolutionaries has not been mentioned in the passage. In this context, B is also opposing the passage. How? B is wrong. It says democracy needs to have revolutionaries in a position. Author has said that opposition is required there. But look at this part, last part. He says the national unity of free people depends upon a sufficiently even balance. It talks about a balance, a sufficiently even balance of political power to make it impracticable for the administration. Impracticable, something that cannot be made practical. To make it impracticable for the administration to be arbitrary, so that the administration does not become arbitrary, any manmane dhang se, without any planning or in an organized way. They don't work, but they work out of chance and on their own. So administration cannot become arbitrary at the same time, and for opposition to be revolutionary and irreconcilable. Irreconcilable. So opposition should not become revolutionary. It becomes hard for the government to work with them, and they don't listen to, they don't reconcile. So both should be, there should be an equal balance, and both should be contained. So that's the reason this option B is incorrect, because it says the opposition should be revolutionaries. A is out. C, rulers in a democracy need the support of opposition for their political survival. It talks about the political survival. D says in a democracy, the opposition is indispensable for the balance of political power and good governance. Absolutely correct. It is indispensable for the balance of political power and good governance. So there should be a balance. So as per the passage, the importance of opposition has been emphasized, and D option correctly represents that without any change in the degree. अब आते हैं assumption पे 54. In a democracy, a strong opposition is required only if the head of the government is indifferent. Only if the, no, author has not gone for this specification, rather he has spoken in a general way, and in all cases an opposition is required. So first is out. Second, the more aggressive the opposition, the better is the governance in a democracy. Be careful, author is talking about balance. He's not talking the more aggressive when they become, in this way if we go, कि जितने ज़्यादा aggressive उतना better the governance, which may lead to revolutionaries and something with which the government cannot reconcile. ऐसा नहीं कह रहा है वो. तो it is also violating. Second is violating the magnitude. D should be the answer. Both assumptions are incorrect. Right. The last sentence goes against this second statement. Next passage. There has been no democracy that has grown economically without corporate capitalism. It talks about democracy and corporate capitalism, right? And how the corporate capitalism helps a government. Question number 61. What is the critical message? Corporate capitalism is important for economic growth of a state and also for democracy. Sounds good? It is, capitalism is important for economic growth of a state and also for democracy, right? Both are given. Economic growth, the benefit of the economy, and as well as the benefit of the democracy, both are given. You see here, he says a vibrant corporate capitalist base also leads to additional revenues for the state, which in turn can be used for greater welfare for the marginalized and creating a more level playing field in terms of opportunities. So it helps the democracy, it helps the state as well. It's not just the economic growth, but enables the state to take care of, to become a welfare state, sort of. So option A is good. Option B says corporate capitalism is imperative for a modern state to achieve its political objective. Again, it is confined to political objectives. Option A is better because it talks about economic growth and also includes democracy. So B is not as good as the option A is, because only confined to political objectives. C, no state can ensure the economic survival for long without the role of corporate capitalism. Again, it does not talk about the economic survival, and it also leaves out the other aspect of the passage. The other aspect is that it's not just the economic survival, it is also talking how they can work as a welfare state because of the revenue this corporate capitalism generates. D says corporate capitalism and democracy have mutual dependence for their continued existence. Please be careful. It is how the democracy is dependent on corporate capitalism. That is given in the passage. It is not the other way around, that how corporate capitalism is dependent on democracy, not given here. So this mutual independence is out, right? So this is the word play has been done by the examiner here, and you were supposed to be observant enough. Option A is the best option for question number 61. And as I told you, there has been no democracy that has grown economically without corporate capitalism. It talks about a democracy and then talks about how the corporate capitalism is helpful. And so the A is the best option. Now, second question number 62 assumption based. Corporate capitalism promotes the growth of labor force and provides more employment opportunities. Given in the last sentence, directly follows very simple assumption. Second, poor and marginalized sections of population are benefited by corporate capitalism due to trickle down effect. Trickle down effect, it comes down. So again given, and C is the correct option. The data support for first and second is by and large present in the last sentence. In the last sentence is the source. It is used for the welfare of the marginalized and creating a more level playing field in terms of opportunities. So was a very easy assumption question. Next passage is just a statement, and this question is slightly different because the examiner has terminology. Look at the language. Which one of the following statement best reflect the best explanation? The statement reflect the best explanation of the above passage. The statement says a network of voluntary associations stands as a buffer between the keyword is buffer here, between the relatively powerless individual and the potentially powerful state. So network of voluntary association stands as a buffer. Buffer is meaning of the buffer is that something that protects and supports, in a way. So that's why buffer, it works as a buffer between the two, relatively powerless individual and potentially powerful state. So the role of the voluntary association is described. Now, which is the best explanation? Option A कहता है it emphasizes the inability of the state to enforce its will in practice against the opposition of certain groups within it. It has generalized, generalized in a way that it emphasizes the inability of the state to enforce its will in practice. It is rather, it's not inability. So this choice of words make it incorrect. It is rather that the voluntary organizations, how they protect the individuals relatively and give a space to those who are who needs the protection. So A is out because of its generalized nature. B says it is a cooperative organization for the promotion of the well-being and development of the personality of its members. Now it is not talking about the members of the voluntary organization, it is rather talking about the individuals, any general public. So B is also weak. C says it takes individuals out of a state of isolation and gives them a chance to participate in the common endeavor. That's what buffer is. Buffer actually provides them the protection and gives a kind of support to them. So C represents that. And D says it permits citizens to have a variety of loyalties and allegiance. Now, allegiance is like their associations, their support, have a variety of loyalties and allegiance. C is more specific because it states give them a chance to participate in the common endeavor. Out of a state of isolation, it saves them and gives them some chance of survival. So C is the best option. D is actually D is the second best option, I would say, but it does not represent the idea more effectively. And now we go to question number 71. The last two passages. A single number for inflation is an aggregate across different commodities and services. The price rise differs for different items of consumption. So the single number is arrived at by assigning weights to different commodities and services. Right. Then he talks about WPI and CPI and all. Question number 71 here. We need to find the message of the passage. A says we must use WPI exclusively in measuring price rise and CPI should be done away with. Again, it is not, author has nowhere given. So A is out. Similarly, option B, the present calculation of inflation rate does not correctly measure price rise of individual item or commodity. Sounds good, we can hold it. C, inflation data underrepresents services in the consumption basket. Inflation data underrepresents services in the consumption basket, but services are also given in the passage. So we cannot say that it underrepresents. And D, knowledge of inflation rate is not really of any use to anybody in the country. Again, a very weak option. Nowhere it is given. rather I should put a cross here. It's not of any use. Author has not commented that. So the best option should be option B. Present calculation of inflation rate does not correctly measure price rise of individual item, because it is kind of aggregate it takes, the average it takes. So the individual items are not included, are not represented directly. So it says a single number is an aggregate across different commodities and services. The price rise differs for different items of consumption, so the single number is arrived at by assigning weights to different commodities. So actually it is the representation of the whole in a way, and that's why it does not correctly represent a single item. Hence the correct option should have been B. B for Bombay, second statement, the second option. That was question number 71. So these are the last three passages which have only one question based on them. Like question number 71, we have here this passage, trust stands commonly defined as being vulnerable to others. Then it talks about entrepreneurships and conduct. What is the crux of the passage? The last question, number 72. Now, crux of A option, trustworthiness cannot be expected in entrepreneurship. Nowhere, no support for this, that it cannot be expected. Cannot be expected in entrepreneurship. I show you the para which opposes this statement. Author says trust stands commonly defined as being vulnerable to others. Entrepreneurship implies trust in others and willingness to expose oneself to betrayal. So trust is involved in entrepreneurship. And a statement A says trustworthiness cannot be expected in entrepreneurship. Trustworthiness cannot be expected in entrepreneurship. But the trust is there. Right. And then one more element, that it does not represent the main point of the passage. A is out. B, trustworthy people are the most vulnerable people, and now we don't know that they are the most vulnerable. They are vulnerable as given in the passage, but most superlative degree, no data. B is out. C, no economic activity is possible without being exposed to betrayal. Now again a kind of extreme notion, no support for this. And D, trust is important, though it entails risk. Yes, the risk is given because of the vulnerability factor, and trust is important. D is the best option. I'm going to show you the data support for this. Look at its importance first. It says trust in expert systems is the essence of globalizing behavior. Trust itself emerges as a super commodity in the social markets. It means trust is important, right? But it is vulnerable and it is risky as given in the first statement. Trust stands commonly defined as being vulnerable to others. Trusting conduct also means holding others in good esteem, right? So anyway, vulnerability and this part supports the option D. So D is the right answer for this question number 72. So the students, this paper of 2025 was, I can say that from moderate or moderate plus. Barring 2-3 questions, none of the other questions could have given you any doubts, and you should have been able to score or solve at least 22-23 questions with the high accuracy, with 90% accuracy, though there were 29 questions. So 3-4 questions could have been skipped and remaining questions could have been done with 90% accuracy. It's a very good score. I mean, minimum 50 anybody could have scored in this paper, right? So that's it. Thank you so much and all the very best for your results.